We're very welcome here to the 8th annual Western Australia Irish Famine Commemoration. It's hard to believe that 8 years have passed since 2017, since we had Uachtaráin here and Michael D. Higgins here to open this wonderful memorial. And the 2025 National Famine Commemoration Memorial was held at Kilmallock Famine Memorial Park in Kilmallock in County Limerick yesterday. And Uachtaráin and President Higgins gave the keynote address at that. So, first of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Wajak Perth region people. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this city and this region. The Western Australia Famine Committee is made up of a number of dedicated individuals who put on this commemoration each year, but also have done a lot of work and projects in the background, of which we'll tell you about that later on. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Tom Murphy. I'm the treasurer of the committee, but I'm also joined on the committee by Fred Ray, Vince Gallagher, Jim Egan, Sean Daly, Sean McDonagh and Peter McKenna. And we've also like to make a special welcome to our Irish Bright Ships project researcher, Dr. Caroline Smith. And Caroline is going to give you a little bit more information about that project later on. I'd like to acknowledge our special guests who are here today. The Honourable Alanna Clohesy, MLC, President of the Legislative Council, Minister Stephen Dawson, MLC, Dr. Carmen Lawrence, AO, former Premier of Western Australia and Emeritus Professor at the School of Psychological Science at the University of Western Australia, Joan Walsh and Charlie Smith, the sculptors of this fantastic memorial, and also all the other representatives of the Irish community groups who are here today. We thank you very much for coming along and supporting us today. Also, I want to make a special acknowledgement to Frank Smith, who carries out weekly maintenance of the memorial. And as you can see, Frank does a brilliant job. And I know every year we thank him, but you know, for the days we aren't here, Frank is here keeping this memorial in tip-top shape. So thank you very much, Frank. And I'd also like to acknowledge all those people who sent us apologies. There are a few of them, but we thank them in advance for their support of this commemoration, and we're sorry to see that they couldn't be with us today, but we wish to acknowledge them. So we have a very interesting and diverse commemoration here for you today. We're going to start off with a prayer, reading of the famine prayer by Diane Baker. And I'd also, before Diane says the prayer, I'd also like to acknowledge any descendants of the Bright Ship girls who are in attendance today, of which I know there are a few. So to start the commemoration, we're going to be reading of the famine prayer by Diane Baker.
In memory of those who died in the Irish famine, grant eternal rest to them. As we remember them, let us never forget those who continue to die in hunger in the world today. We remember those who were forced to leave our country in search of food and security. Open our hearts to those who come to our land in need. To those who experience hunger, give food. To those of us who have food, grant a hunger for justice.
Thank you, Diane. Now, our second speaker is Marian Byrne, and she's going to tell this Mary Carberry story. Some stories begin with a whisper, carried on the wind from a faraway place. This is one such story, a tale woven from the threads of loss, love and quiet resilience. It begins in the green fields of County Galway and follows a young Irish girl, Elizabeth Carberry, through famine and exile to the sun-baked soil of Western Australia. What began as survival becomes legacy. What was once silence becomes voice. This is not just the story of one woman, it is a story of many of the girls who crossed oceans with empty hands and full hearts, and who, against all odds, helped shape a new land. Sit with Elizabeth now and listen, for hers is a story that insists on being remembered.
Do you get? Hello, everybody. As the old Irish song goes, I just dropped in to see you all. I'll only stay a while. But my story, well, it stayed a long while. It crossed oceans and survived famines. It grew roots in red earth, bore fruit in children, and echoed in chapel bells. My name is Elizabeth Carberry, though I became Elizabeth Maguire when I found love in this far-off land. And if you'll sit a moment with me, I'd like to tell you how I came to be here. I was born in County Galway, in the shadow of the rolling green fields that once cradled our hopes, before on Gorta Moor. The great hunger took them all away. I was just a girl then, though life aged me quickly. My sister and Mary and I came from proud folk. Poor, yes, but proud. Our father died too young, and our mother, Sarah, did everything she could to keep us together. But when the hunger came, truly came, we had no choice. We ended up in the Mount Bellow workhouse, a place so heavy with sorrow it still breathes in my bones when I think of it. Rows of iron beds, gruel in chipped tin bowls, the smell of mildew and desperation. I saw mothers separated from children. I heard cries smothered into silence. Hunger isn't just a thing in the belly, it hollows the heart too. Then came 1851, a notice went up. Girls wanted for emigration to Australia. Australia, a word like a whisper, a dream wrapped in salt water and stars. We didn't even know where it was, only that it was far from here, far from the graves, far from the empty plates. Our mother made the hardest decision a mother can. She signed our names, Mary's and mine, and handed us over to a chance. We never saw her again. We travelled to Dublin, then to Plymouth, where the ship Palestine waited. There were 32 of us Irish girls from the workhouse. We had little more than the clothes we'd been given and each other. A matron watched over us. We were taught how to cook, sew, read a little. We were told we would be wives, maids, and mothers. I was only 18. The voyage took months. The sea stretched out so far it seemed to swallow time. But we held fast to each other, sang when we could, cried when we must, and prayed with the full weight of our ancestors behind us. And then we arrived. Perth. Dust. Sun. Gum trees. And something else. Space. Space to breathe. Space to build. Space for a future. That's where I met him, Big Jim Maguire. He was 21 with the kindest eyes I'd ever seen, in a world that had shown me too much cruelty. I had Mary at my side when I married him. She was my bridesmaid, my past, and Jim became my future. He brought me to Dardanup, to a patch of land rough and wild. We made it a home. The earth was hard, but our hands were harder. And in that place, I bore 9 children. I bore stories too, carried them in my heart until the nights got cold and I needed to remember who I was. I told Jim everything about the workhouse, about the death that hung in the air in Galway, like a fog that wouldn't lift, about the neighbours who vanished, bound for coffin ships, about the silence that wrapped around us like a shroud. And he listened. God bless him, he listened. Together we planted more than crops. We planted a life. A church rose beside us. Thomas Little Hall, stone by stone, with hands like ours. Our children grew, our faith grew, and so did this land. But I never forgot the girls. The girls, the ones from Mount Bellew, from Skibbereen, from Limerick and Donegal and Clare. They were barely women, 15, 16. Yet they stepped aboard these ships like warriors in calico. They didn't sail toward fortune, they sailed toward survival, toward the hope that there was something more than graves and famine waiting on the other side of the world. And they found it. They became the silent builders of this land. Their names were never in the papers, no statues carved, no history books etched, but they are there in every chapel hymn, every wheat field, every child who walks the land they tamed. So today I ask you, remember us. Remember me, Elizabeth Carberry, an Irish girl who crossed the world with nothing but a sister's hand in hers and a dream in her heart. Remember Mary. Remember Sarah, who said goodbye to her daughters with tears that she never let them see. Remember the courage it took just to leave. And when you look up at the stars tonight, remember the girls who followed those very stars across the sea. The girls who built Western Australia with calloused hands and unshakable hearts. We weren't just passengers. We were the roots, and through us a forest grew. I leave you now with a short excerpt from a poem by John O'Brien, There's a Little Irish Mother. There's a little Irish mother that a lonely vigil keeps in the settler's hut where seldom stranger comes, watching by the homemade cradle where one more Australian sleeps, while the breezes whisper weird things to the gums, where the settlers battle gamely, beaten down to rise again, and the brave bush wives the toil and silence share, where the nation is a building in the hearts of splendid men. There's a little Irish mother always there. Gareth Mahagat, Slán go fór.
Thank you so much, Marian. A beautiful piece. Now, I'd like to make a special welcome to a lady who has a very strong family connection to the girls who came out in the bride ships. Would you please welcome Dr. Carmen Lawrence, AO.
That was a wonderful story, and one that I'm sure touches all our hearts. I come here with a name like Lawrence and you think, how the hell does that become Irish? But I have a stack of ancestors. In fact, in Western Australia, I'm fortunate to have every category of settler that came between 1853, in my case, and 1866. Pensioner Guard and his family, McNamara. The O'Grady's, free settlers, with their daughters. Mary Kennedy Murphy, from the workhouse in Enniscorthy, with her 5 children. And the 2 women who came as single women on the bride ships, Elizabeth Anderson and Joanna Duggan. And a couple of convicts, I shouldn't leave them out. One poor young boy from Galway, John Coyne, done for sheep stealing in 1849, and you know what sort of a year that was. And the other, John Cosgrove, via Liverpool. He was a serious criminal, a banditti he was described as, in fact. So I have all these Irish forebears, which prompted me to ask the question, how did they survive the famine? Because these were all people who were illiterate for the most part. They were clearly poor people. They came out here on assisted passages of one kind or another, some with chains around their ankles, and they settled all around York and Northern and Tujay. And we know of the women that they were asked to come. I was having a little conversation earlier that the so-called bride ships brought quite a few women who were probably young women, probably pressured into leaving the workhouses of Ireland. Because we know that enormous financial pressure was placed on those workhouses, and one way they could reduce the burden as they saw it was to have young women migrate. I'm not sure about the 2 of my women, Elizabeth Anderson and Joanna Duggan, whether they were in workhouses at the time. I suspect they were, because I haven't been able to find their families. And certainly Joanna Kennedy Murphy, who lost her first husband at the beginning of the famine and remarried, she came out here straight out of a workhouse, and I was able to find evidence of that. I'm sure you all know that the colonial authorities were very keen to have settlers who could be domestic servants. And of course behind that was the view that many of these young women particularly would settle and marry and have children. And I'm sure many of you have read some of the newspapers at the time. The attitudes toward the Irish were not always flattering. But interestingly, even when there was resistance to these young Irish girls, paupers as they were often called, the people themselves, the settlers here, spoke well of them and saw their sturdiness and their willingness to adapt. This is one of the urgings from a letter writer in the early 1850s, talking about the convicts, the ticket of leave men, the people who are being pardoned. How are these men to be domesticated? The letter writer asked, to settle down as quiet and inoffensive members of the community, by furnishing them with fitting helpmates. Give the probationer an honest, sober, frugal and industrious wife, and more is done toward his reformation than all the moral training of the establishment has been able to effect. That's a pretty big burden for the women to bear, I have to say. There are many females, he goes on, brought up in the orphan asylums and other charitable institutions of the mother country, admirably adapted for the purposes of immigration, and admirably adapted to give an exalted tone to that portion of the society in which they would move. And indeed, although these are sentiments we wouldn't repeat today, the sexism is really obvious. Nonetheless, it's clear that these young women came out here, worked as domestic servants, sometimes for a period, got married and had typically very large families, who then spread through, particularly through the wheat belts and the agricultural areas of Western Australia. And they founded those districts. They supported the communities, they worked in the local churches, and whether they were Orange, as Elizabeth Anderson from Tyrone was, or Catholic from the south, like Joanna Duggan, they, in large measure, set aside those differences And it's very clear to me that in those small communities in 2J, New Nile, Newcastle, Irish Town, these women forged communities that have been unbreakable to this very day. And I'm very grateful indeed to have had ancestors like these. I've been, as people do when they get to a certain age, fossicking around in genealogy sites, minutes, newspapers, to find the faint traces of these relatives. Because they were illiterate and poor, there's not much to be found of them, except for the convicts, of course, who are very carefully documented. But for the others, they're a faint wisp of smoke. And when I returned to Ireland a little while ago, although I knew roughly where they lived and where they had spent their lives during the famine, and I could, from various records, reconstruct the horror that they must have experienced during those terrible years of the famine, and the pressures that ultimately led to them leaving, I wasn't able to find them individually in very much detail. But in a way, that doesn't matter. They happen to be my forebears, but more importantly, they are the solid base on which this community of West Australia is founded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lawrence, for sharing this story with us. Now, for our next speaker, it's a great honour to welcome Kevin Wringe, a proud descendant of one of the many courageous women who journeyed across the seas aboard the Bride ships to Western Australia in the mid-19th century. Today, Kevin shares the remarkable story of his great-grandmother, Mary McConnell, a young Irish woman who endured the hardships of the Great Famine, braved the long voyage aboard the Claddagh, and helped build a life in a fledgling colony a world away. Through her story and that of her husband, Thomas Castle, we glimpse the grit, resilience and spirit that helped shape Western Australia. Please join me in welcoming Kevin as he reflects on Mary's extraordinary legacy and the generations that followed her.
Good afternoon all. I express my deep gratitude to Fred Ray and organisers for the privilege of participating with you all today. And I'm grateful for the invitation to speak at this special and poignant commemoration. Mary McConnell, my great-grandmother on my father's side, was a passenger on the Bride ship Claddagh. She was born in Dublin in 1831. She lived through the Irish Great Famine, and at the age of 22 years, immediately following the famine, sailed to Western Australia. Following the arduous sea journey lasting 85 days, she arrived in Fremantle on September the 3rd, 1853. She was one of 125 single female servers on that ship. It is noteworthy that the fledgling WA colony was, at that time, very short of labour, and it was experiencing a serious gender imbalance. Following her arrival, Mary lived and worked in Vass, where she was identified in the Catholic Salvado census of 1854. She later married Thomas Castle in Vass on June the 15th, 1856. Thomas had arrived in Fremantle from London on the Pyrenees on May the 1st, 1853, as a convict. The married couple worked at Fishley near Wannerup, and in 1862, with 3 children, Mary and Thomas trekked some 70 kilometres to Upper Capel, where they settled 6 kilometres west of Kirrup on 2 blocks of land, each measuring 49 acres. There they eked out a living on this virgin land, later to be surveyed by John Forrest, who later became Premier of Western Australia. They named the farm Castledene, meaning home of the castles. Mary and Thomas had 3 more children at Castledene. Of their 6 children, 3 died at ages 1, 8 and 23 years while living at Castledene. Imagine the huge challenges the couple faced, raising a family largely through self-subsistence, experiencing the grief relating to the passing of 3 of their children, and the arduous labour. Mary and Thomas both died there in 1904. 6 generations of this family have lived on and farmed Castledene over the last 163 years. Today, the property is farmed by two of Mary and Thomas's great-great-grandchildren, with support from their fathers, who also farmed Castledean. Each generation of the family has added substantial land holdings adjoining Castledean. Our ancestry search and gathering of information has been a fascinating experience, undertaken by a team including family members and good friend Michael Carron. We enjoyed the journey and our findings, including our contact with the Irish Family History Centre in Dublin, Ancestry.com, the Batty Library, the WA Historical Society, and more. I was delighted to discover in 2023 a copy of Mary's baptism certificate at Finglas Parish in Dublin, where Mary was christened on December the 11th, 1831, in St. Canice's Church. Family members and I visited the Finglas Church in 2023. We continue to search for further information on Mary's early years in Dublin. I visited Ireland many times with my late wife Patrice, who was born and raised in County Clare. On one such occasion, with my brother John and his wife Jean, we visited the National Famine Memorial in Ireland, located at the foot of Croagh Patrick in County Mayo. It includes a constructed 1820s coffin ship. It left a deep impression on us. Indeed, it was very poignant and very moving. My great-grandparents on my mother's side were also Irish. I stand in awe at my great-grandmother Mary McConnell's life, the huge challenges that confronted her in Dublin during the Great Famine, her long, risky journey on the sailing ship Clara to Western Australia, and the many hardships which she and her husband Thomas Castle met and overcame in Upper Capel. Her tenacity, her perseverance, her faith, and her achievements and legacy leave me with feelings of deep gratitude. Mary McConnell would be very proud of her great-great-great-grandchildren present here today, along with members of their parents' and grandparents' generations. I am very impressed with the memorial located here, unveiled by Irish President Michael D. Higgins, and the Irish Famine Commemoration conducted annually on this spot. I commend you for this special service, and I thank you for the opportunity to share with you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I'm always fascinated every year to hear the stories of the family research and keeping the legacy and the memory of the bright ship girls alive. So thank you.
My name is Sir Charles Edward Trevelyan. I was the personal assistant of Her Majesty's Treasury during the years of the Great Irish Famine. My role was famine relief. I was the colonial administrator for the financial support, the aid and the funding that England granted to both Ireland and Scotland during those years of extreme distress. I can still see it in the faces of the audience here today. The time has not yet arrived that any man who can with confidence say that he fully appreciates the nature and the bearings of that great event which will long be inseparably associated with the year 1847. Here we have the cottier farmers from the west of Ireland. Once they were located on 1 up to 4 acres of land, that family, they were provided for. A cabin, it could be raised in a couple of days without the expense of a sixpence. And the potatoes at a cost of very little labour provided them a subsistence of food, which from habit they were perfectly content. Some with a pig, a cow, a donkey, or pony, occasional labour, and at a very low rate of wages, gave them what was absolutely necessary to pay a rent, and for other such articles like clothing and food and whatever else was absolutely necessary, and on the lowest part of that population. The first step of our improvement was wanting to this state of things. The people had no incitement to be industrious or to procure comforts which were utterly beyond their reach. Many perhaps had never seen their ordinary food being of the cheapest and commonest description. Having no value in the market, it gave them no command for butchers' meats, manufacturers, colonial produce, or any other article of comfort or enjoyment. Those who were habitually and entirely fed on potatoes lived upon the extreme verge of human subsistence. And when they were deprived of their accustomed food, there was nothing cheaper to which they could resort, because they were already at the lowest point of the descending scale. And from there beyond, starvation or beggary.
Laissez-faire, I say, laissez-faire. Don't believe one word out of Trevelyan's mouth. Don't believe a word of it. Now, for any of you Irish like myself who know nothing about nothing, we do know that laissez-faire means... I can't hear you. I can't hear you. And that's exactly what Trevelyan did, you see. He let it be. Now, wait till I sing a little song, and it goes a little bit like this. Oh, by a lonely prison walls. Where are you going, lads? I heard a young lad calling. Now, if you don't know anything about that story, that's about a young Irish farmer whose children were dying. He stole a few handfuls of corn because they were in the last hours of their life. He fed them. And as a result of that, Trevelyan and his lovely little friends sent him away for a very long time. And they were some of the darkest times in Irish history. If you were to imagine the most catastrophic event that can ever happen in the world, who mentioned Trump? Sorry, we'll keep him out of it. It was the Great Irish Hunger. Now, they called it a famine. I'm not quite sure why they did that, because you see, imagine, everything that we ever needed to survive on was in the tubular. And this is what the Irish families, this is what we survived on for generations, as did our fathers before them and their fathers before them. We survived on the Irish tubular and hardly nothing else to eat, a good 30% of Ireland's population. Now, I want to give you a few interesting facts. Who has a good catch? Let's see. Here we go. 95% of Ireland during the years of 1847 were in the possession of landlords. So right now you could all be sitting on Croftonmore Vandalore, who was our landlord in County Clare. And you would be like ourselves, having a lovely time, We weren't all starving. I just want to point this out, by the way. We survived very happily on potatoes. We were minding our own business. We didn't want them coming in and telling us what to do after they nearly annihilated us when to hell or to Connacht came and visited Ireland. Sure, Jesus, what more can they do to us? Then they put in the poor law. We couldn't do this, we couldn't do that. We couldn't even speak our own religion. But you see, the thing was, we were all a bit worried about things because, as you know, you all have to pay your rent. Some of you own your own house. You're very lucky we never got that far. But the thing was, there's children here now, so I won't say the word, but Butterine is what we'd say in Gaelic. And he was a very cruel landlord called Crofton Mór Vandalore. And he took out the most mass land clearances in the worst years of the Irish famine. When all of us were already struggling, we were on the bones of our arse, so to speak, and we had nothing. And he wanted us off his land. And why? So they could consolidate. Clear the Irish off, get them off our land, the lazy, good-for-nothing nothings. But sure, we were already building roads to nowhere. They were already killing us. Trevelyan cancels the soup kitchens 3 months in. Don't get me started. Dear love, you look like you've bit over the spud. Do you know you could live on this for the rest of your life? Did you know that? Did you know that? That has every nutrient you can possibly imagine. There you go, love. Now the problem is this old disease, this airborne fungal infection. Now we hadn't a clue what it was. A lot of us thought it was a curse. It could have been. We're still sort of sitting on the fence with that one. But this thing was called, here you go, love, an airborne fungal infection. Killed our crop. And it was called, do you know what it was called? Phytophthora infestans. Would you like to try saying it once? Phyta infestans. That was an airborne fungal disease that came from North America in 1844. First appeared in Ireland in early autumn of 1845. Now, our early potato crop, which would generally have made up about 1/6 of the whole crop, when we raised it in September and October, it had escaped. But it was the later crop, commonly known as the people's crop. When that was raised in December and January, it was tainted with blight. And at an advanced stage of maturity. And once the disease commenced, it made steady progress. And it was seen at the opening of the potato pits. The potatoes were a mass of rotten. And we had nothing left. To get to the Union's poorhouse. Waiting. Begging. Praying to get in. Hundreds of evicted families. Thousands of skeleton-like creatures. Clad in rags. We were the men, women, and the children. Our poor, suffering children who had to witness the brutality and the cruelty of their vast land clearances. We had nowhere to go. It was freezing. And it was the landlord's agent. He was sitting on his saddle with a dirty smirk on his face and the sheriff beside him, giving the signal to evict us. They tore the roof from over our heads. They rammed down the walls of our homes, our cabins. Even our mud hovel shelters flattened so we could never seek shelter in our homes again. And our neighbours, every one of them were threatened if they tried to help us, they were next for eviction. And there was the landlord there sitting in the saddle of his horse with a dirty smirk on his face. The sheriff giving the order to evict us, and the bailiffs, and the crowbar brigade, frog marching us out of our own home like criminals, throwing us to the ground, and leaving us there like animals. It was crawl or walk to the workhouse. And when we got to the gates, we prayed that they'd open up and that they might call out our family name, our district. How can they not hear our cries of starvation? Oh, my dear Rosalie, no. Do not cry. Do not weep. So glad you hope. So glad you hope. So glad you health and wealth and hope. Oh, my dear Rosalie. Oh. There was no famine. The potatoes rotted. There was no famine. It was a starvation of fruit.
Thank you very much, Michael. I hope that for anyone who has not witnessed that piece before, that as much as you could, that you enjoyed it. I certainly know that growing up in County Clare, even in 2025, the name Vandalore is still associated in Kilrush with distress and sorrow, and I'm sure it's the same wherever you are and wherever you come from in the island of Ireland. Next we're going to have a reading of The Immigrant Ship. And we've two great supporters of the Famine Commemoration here with us. Tony Costa and Heather Henderson are two former mayors of Subiaco, which is the local government area of which the memorial is located. So to read The Immigrant Ship, we call in Heather Henderson.
This poem was written in 1857. It's called The Immigrant Ship. It was written by a person known as J.A.B. and appeared in the Ballymena Observer in that same year. It talks of the sadness of leaving Ireland behind and the heartbreak of saying goodbye to loved ones. The Immigrant Ship. The air was clear and the wind was fair, while on the flowing tide a gallant ship with sails unfurled proudly was seen to ride. Upon her noble deck, her friends and countryside. Fate drove them from their dear old homes, from where they loved to dwell. It tore them from their native land, the land they loved so well. To kindred friends, the immigrants were forced to bid farewell. Adieu, they cried, to my homeland, to all in life most dear. And when they caught the shore's last glimpse, they shed a parting tear. Parting tears shed for home and friends, what bitter tears they were.
Thank you, Heather. We said earlier on that this is the 8th annual Famine Commemoration, And before 2017, this memorial did not exist, and a number of people came together to drive its creation and its inception and its placing in Subiaco, and to put a memorial in place for the memories of the girls that came out in the bride ships. Following on from this, the committee hasn't stood still, and we've undertaken a new project called the Irish Bride Ships Legacy Project. And to talk to you more about that is our project researcher, Dr. Caroline Smith. And following Caroline's talk, Sean Daly is going to come up and he's going to just let you know how you can contribute to the project. Caroline.
Thanks very much. I actually want to begin by just thank you to everyone who's here for having me here as well, because it's such a joy to actually talk about this project, which has just been developing over the last sort of year and a half, 2 years. And of course, we're going to be sort of launching the website this week, and I'll tell you a bit more about that. I also want to thank Fred and all the members of the WA Famine Committee just for actually asking me to be part of it as well. I think it's a project which represents a really important step in recognising the stories of a group of women who have long been left out of the history of WA. I mean, there has been a little bit written about them, but in terms of there being sort of a digital presence of a collection of their stories, their biographies, there's really not been very much. And actually, this point was sort of brought home to me late last year, when the committee and myself met with Alanna Clohesy and Stephen Dawson to recognise their support for the project. Because Alanna actually said to me at this meeting that she thought one of the key things about this and why it was something really worth supporting was that the stories of women, and particularly women who have settled in WA, which was then the Swan River colony, they're not often mentioned. There's a little bit written about them, but in terms of where they settled, the families that they brought forth, and the detail, the minutiae of their lives, it's really not something that's very well known, except to descendants who've done amazing research. These women came, as we've heard and seen, from a land that was really devastated by famine. The population had receded significantly because of that. Of course, immigration was a big part of that, as well as the death. And they had lost whole families in many cases, were crammed into workhouses and institutions which were riddled with disease, and the immigration was often organised from there. And for many of those families, it was a great relief to be offered the opportunity to come to the other side of the world. Of course, significantly, it was the other side of the world, and what they would have known about the Swan River colony, its vastness, its very different climate from Ireland, was really a mystery, I think, for many of them. But they took that leap, and it was a significant leap, which led to them playing a really important role in that colony and its development. And they were noted as very resilient girls, and this is something that's come across in my research. It can be seen very clearly. Perhaps one example was the girls who walked the stony ground from Perth to Tujay on foot in August 1853. They had only just arrived in Fremantle and then to Perth, and then they walked to Tujay because there was an immigrant depot being set up there from which they would be hired for work. Many of them were servant girls. And so over the course of a year and a half, I've been doing this research from a variety of different sources. Significantly, I would say, Family History WA has played a really important role. They've actually got a group, the Convict Group, who have their own project that they set up a few years ago, which has provided me with a lot of information about the men that these women married who were ticket of leave, former convicts. And Family History WA in general has been a real support. Also the Batty Library, and we've also got sources like the Biographical Dictionary of WA, etc. And of course the research done by descendants as well, because some of that is online, and it's been a really a great help to me. So the first stage of the project was developing the website, and that's really what we're going to launch today. Early next week, we're going to have a website called irishbrideships.com, which is going to collate the information about the stories of these girls. There's a database which can be searched according to their names, their age, their place of origin, and their religion as well, and the ships that they were on. We've also got a page dedicated to the history, looking at the famine history, also information about the workhouses that they came from in many cases, not all of them did. And we've also got historical information about the state of the Swan River colony as it was when they arrived, and some of the challenges that they faced as well, because of course it was very unique compared to other what went on to become states of Australia, particularly the vastness of it and the harshness of the landscape, and these of course these things offered great challenges to the girls. But it's been a really, really wonderful project to be involved in. As I said, I think it's something that hasn't been done before, certainly in WA. There is, if you go online, there is actually a website dedicated to the stories of women who arrived in the eastern states, and that's actually attached to the Sydney Memorial for the famine. But in WA, there really hasn't been anything up until this date online, and I'm really, really proud to have been involved in this. So we are hoping to add to the database. I'm continuing to do that, and but the information on the background of these girls and the famine is there, and we're actually hoping that people will reach out to us as well, to the committee, and if they have stories about their family members, we're certainly hoping to collaborate with a lot of people on that as well. So yeah, that's the project, which the first stage of which we're launching today, and as I said, it's been wonderful to work on, and thank you very much for all the support for that.
Thank you, Caroline. As any good chairman, Fred Ray has told me, I slightly jumped the gun a little bit. It's terrible a Corkman telling a Clareman when he's wrong, but we're going to have a poem read by Margo Byrne from the Irish Theatre Players. It's called The Famine Year. This haunting poem reveals the devastating human toll of the Great Irish Famine. The speaker, representing the starving Irish, directly confronts the oppressors, highlighting the stark contrast between their suffering and the prosperity of the privileged. Jane Francesca Wilde wrote under the pen name Speranza and was the mother of Oscar Wilde. Margo.
Correct him, Margo. Correct him.
Thanks, Tommy. I'm actually from the Fenians Fremantle and Freedom group. I'd like to be in the Irish against ye will rise as witnesses. From the cabins and the ditches in the charred, uncoffined masses, for the angel of the trumpet will know them as he passes. A ghastly, spectral army, before the great God will stand, and arraign ye as our murderers, the spoilers of our land.
Thank you, Margo. In addition to the great work the Fenians Committee do, I think you'd be a great fit with the theatre players. And of course, I want to acknowledge all the Irish community groups in Perth and all the tremendous work they each do in their own fields, and the support they've given the WAIFC to date. We're very grateful. Now, to let you know how you can contribute to the launch of the website and the Irish Brideships Legacy Project, Sean Daly is going to tell you a little bit more.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Caroline previously mentioned, the first step of the project was designing and setting up the website. We're now ready to move into the next stage of the project, which is about documenting the lives of these remarkable young women, their journeys, their experiences, their hardships, the places they lived, and those who they married. We expect this will take approximately 18 to 24 months to complete. It will involve investigating historical records both in Ireland and in Australia, interviewing people, including descendants of these women, and documenting all that information and analysing it to ensure that it is factual before we put it out there in the public domain. As a committee, we will need to involve professional services to support us in this research, and of course that comes at a cost. So on behalf of the committee today, I'm asking if you know of any company or organisation or club, or indeed you as an individual, who may be willing to donate to assist with offsetting these costs involved. Then after today's commemoration, if you could speak with either myself or any of the other committee members, and we'd be happy to provide you with more information on how you can do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. As Sean said, if you would like to contribute, please chat to Sean or myself or any members of the committee. Now, finally, we're going to have the laying of the wreaths. The wreaths are going to be laid by Dr. Carmen Lawrence, Alanna Clohesy, and Heather McKeegan. And following this, if you have your own flowers, you're more than welcome to lay them at the memorial. We also have rosemary and wattle, which you're welcome to come up and take some and put it on the memorial yourself. So now I call on the laying of the wreaths, Dr. Lawrence, Alanna, and Heather. Thank you.
you.